It seems that John Hardin was a jealous man. Married for only 13 months, Hardin would exact deadly vengeance upon a man he deemed to be his romantic rival. The question whether or not Lizzie Hardin had an affair with George Mounts is still up for speculation, but it has led to the story becoming an Appalachian legend. John Hardin became notorious for not only being the only legally executed by rope man in Buchanan County, Virginia, but for also joking around with the hangman before his sentence was carried out. A ballad would be written about him, as his waiting on a train would lead to his capture. Come along with us as we walk through the story of John Hardin. There are no online existing pictures of John Hardin or many of the other people that are in this story. The only picture that exists is of the victim, George Mounts. So, in place of those who do not have a photograph, we are using blanked out faces of existing photos. Also, a note about the location of the scene of the crime. Tug River has 3 state lines that it crosses at this particular area in its path. The state lines of Kentucky, Virginia, and West Virginia all converge in this small area. We will try to make the distinction which state is involved in the story, but we want to make it clear that each state line was well within a short distance of each other. All aboard the Kentucky Tennessee Living Time Machine as it is preparing to depart into our story of Appalachian Outlaw John Hardin. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. John and Lizzie Hardin. We are going to open up our story with the source, John Hardin, which was contributed by Michelle Justice. Quote, according to documents on file at the Buchanan County Courthouse, John Hardin, 18, and Lizzie Hardin, 19, were married August 19, 1896, at the home of his parents, Riley and Susan Hardin. Lizzie's parents were Thomas and Jane Hardin. The young couple were residents of Pike County, Kentucky, and neither had been widowed. Unquote. Other than their marriage record and the fact that John Hardin states that he was sure that Lizzie was having an affair behind his back, there really is nothing other than family oral history to indicate the relationship between the married couple. A little family history. According to the source, Facebook group Mountain People of Southwest Virginia and West Virginia, the story of John Hardin, written by Melinda Vicars, Lindell, administrator. We have the reason that Hardin felt that his wife was stepping out on him. Quote, John's uncle Harv Hardin would let George and Lizzie meet each other at his home. John found out about this and went there. His grandmother came out and begged him to leave, not to start any trouble. So John left, but he waited on George down the road and then he killed him. Unquote. From the source, the Daily Intelligencer, the September 27th, 1897 edition, we have the following. Quote, a deadly feud causes the deliberate killing of 2 West Virginia citizens. Williamson, West Virginia, September 26th. The green-eyed monster, jealousy, was the cause of the enactment of a fatal tragedy in the part of Virginia just opposite Gray, this county, Saturday afternoon. Lately, John Hardin, a man of unsavory reputation living in Buchanan County, Virginia, had conceived a deadly hatred for George Mounts, living just across the state line in Mingo County, West Virginia, on account of a friendship between Mounts and his Hardin's wife. Unquote. So, it seems that from the very beginning, it is clear that the motive for the killing of George Mounts had to do with jealousy. This motive never changes throughout the rest of the case. George Mounts and Scott Ellis. There were 2 shooting victims of this case, but we could only find information concerning one of them. According to the George Mounts Find a Grave source, we have the following information. George was born in Logan County, West Virginia on May 4, 1860, to Alexander Alex Mounts, 1824 to 1880. His wife Margaret Peggy Charles Mounts, 1827-1880. George had two siblings, Moses Mounts, 1847 to 1904, and Mary Mounts Johnson, 1857 to 1934. He was married to Sarah Chaplin Mounts, 1885 to 1934, sometime in 1884. Together, the pair had 5 children. They were Lonnie Mounts, 1887 to 1928, Leonard Leslie Mounts, 1887 to 1979, Don Edgar Mounts, 1889 to 1952, Morticia Williams Mounts, 1889 to 1957, and Allie Mounts Stanton, 1894 to 1913. We will now get into the story of what happened on Andes Branch, Virginia, in September 1897. According to the source, Crimes, Criminals, and Characters of the Cumberlands and Southwest Virginia, we have a summary of the account in the book. It seems that Scott Ellis was on a mission that cool autumn fateful day of September 24th, 1897. He was delivering a Williamson, West Virginia court summons to bring in George Mounts. We cannot find any information as to why George Mounts was being summoned to court. Traveling up the logging road on Andy Branch in Virginia, Ellis came across John Hardin sitting on a log. Hardin caressed his .32 Winchester rifle as Ellis asked where Mounts was. Hardin then told him he was up the road logging. When Ellis reached George, the summons was served, and Mounts showed no resistance as he came willingly with him back down the logging road. The pair met up with Harv Mounts, George's uncle, who had gone for salt and gave the two men a share of what he had brought back. Harv went with the men as they continued their trip back down the logging road. Now, we have questions about this. If Scott Ellis had encountered a man holding a .32 Winchester rifle, would that not raise a little bit of a warning to him that something was not right in the situation? I'm just saying. I would be asking if there was not an alternative route out of there if I was him. But oh no, Ellis never even gave so much as a heads up about the situation to either of the men. Now, given he might not have been privy to what was going on between Hardin and Mounts, but still, I would be telling someone that, hey, there's a guy down the road sitting on the log holding a rifle, guys. But I guess that's just me. The deaths of Ellis and Mounts. We have several accounts of what happened after the men came down the mountain. While they may seem similar, there are stark differences. According to the first account given by the Alexandria Gazette, September 29, 1897, we have the following. Quote, Friday afternoon, Mounts in company with Scott Ellis was passing along the public road near the home of Hardin when he was fired upon by John and Tom Hardin, who were lying in ambush. Mounts fell dead. Ellis at once threw up his hands and called to the Hardins, quote, For God's sake, don't shoot me. I have done nothing to you, unquote. Again they fired, and Ellis fell with a mortal wound just above his heart. Mounts and Ellis were two of the best citizens in Mingo County, and the killing created intense excitement. It is claimed Mounts was innocent. The Hardings so far have escaped capture, unquote. For our second account, we have the following, according to the source, John Hardin, which was contributed by Michelle Justice. Quote, Hardin never spoke as he killed George Mounts. Hardin shot Mounts a second time as the victim begged for his life. Hardin then turned his rifle on the two witnesses to the murder, one who barely escaped with his life intact, unquote. Then we have our third account, according to the source, Crimes, Criminals, and Characters of the Cumberlands and Southwest Virginia. We have a summary of the account in the book. As the men came down the logging road, they could no longer see anyone sitting on the log. However, from about 30 yards away, they could hear John Hardin shouting curses towards George Mounts from behind a tree stump. Hardin shot George Mounts in the stomach, and he did not die immediately. He instead tried to keep himself upright by grabbing a hold of an ironwood bush, but he fell anyway, and he got up on his knees and began to plead for his life. Hardin was having none of it, and shot the fatal shot, which Mounts gave a loud cry and fell over. In the meantime, Harv Mounts jumped behind a walnut tree to hide from the gunman. John Hardin then took aim on Scott Ellis. He shot him in the hand and the shoulder first. Harv Mounts then took this opportunity and started sprinting away from the scene. Scott Ellis ran after him until they reached the home of Oliver Clay. Hardin, in the meantime, ran in the other direction, holding his Winchester rifle in his right hand over his head. Scott Ellis was treated for his wounds, and the men went back to the scene to check on George Mounts. There, they found him dying. Mounts asked Clay to build him a fire, which he did right there in the road. It did not take long for a crowd to gather on the road where Mounts laid, and the decision was made not to move him. He died in the road where he laid at 3 o'clock that morning. It was not until 11 o'clock in the morning of the next day that Mounts' wife Sarah came to have his body moved to their home across Tug River to be buried. So, whether or not Scott Ellis was killed, he was definitely shot by John Hardin. Either it was his shoulder or above his heart, the injury would be about in the same location, according to the accounts. And it was certain that Harv Mounts was not injured in the fray. We tend to believe the story that Scott Ellis survived the shooting because Hardin was never charged for his murder. We cannot find any public records concerning Scott Ellis to confirm whether or not he lived after this moment in time. We can find no record of there being a Tom Hardin concerning this case. The only mention of him is in the initial newspaper reports. It could be that it is because John Hardin was able to fire off as many accurate and quick shots as he did, that it is possible that the surviving witnesses thought that there had been more than one person that was the shooter. Hardin's arrest. Realizing that he had just shot and killed at least one person, Hardin knew that the law would come after him. After all, not only was George Mounts dead, but Hardin had shot and possibly killed a Williamson court officer in the line of duty. He knew that if he was caught, that the penalty would be death. According to the source, Crimes, Criminals, and Characters of the Cumberlands and Southwest Virginia, we have a summary of the account in the book. Although the exact route Hardin took for his escape is not known, he did reach the Tug River and tried to find a boat. Unable to score such a find, Hardin plunged into the river and swam across it to the state of West Virginia. There was an eastbound train due at the station that day, and Hardin wanted to be aboard it. However, the train was several days late, and this would help in the capture of Hardin. These events would later appear in the ballad named The Legend of John Hardin, and it was said that he tried to escape, but he was captured because the eastbound train was late. 6 days later, on September 30th, 1897, the sheriff, James Charles of Buchanan County, Virginia, approached John Hardin at War Eagle, West Virginia, and took him into custody without incident. The pair traveled to Grundy, Virginia, and Hardin was placed in a little wooden jail there. Hardin was then examined and charged. Hardin waived his charges to the Buchanan grand jury. He was indicted on the charges on October 27, 1897, and the trial would take place on November 3rd of that same year. It is unclear why Hardin decided to stay in War Eagle vicinity after it was discovered that the train was late. He could have continued moving forward to get out of the area completely, but instead he chose to wait for a train, and it never came for him. The trial. According to the source, Crimes, Criminals, and Characters of the Cumberlands and Southwest Virginia, we have a summary of the account in the book. The trial came to order as scheduled on November 3rd. The case would be heard by a jury and Judge G.L. Counts. When the charges were read, Hardin answered, "Not guilty," and the proceedings began. All of the evidence and witness testimony took 5 days to complete. During the trial, Hardin was placed in the custody of J.N.W. Blankenship and H.M. Francis. The two flanked on either side of Hardin from the jail to the courthouse, through the trial, and back to the jail again. The two men wanted to make sure that Hardin had zero chance to escape their grasp. After all of the arguments had been heard, it was now time for the jury to come to its decision. After a very short time, the jury announced its disagreement about the case. Judge Counts sent the jury back into deliberations to see if they could break its own deadlock. The next morning, a decision had been finally made. The jury declared that Hardin was guilty of murder in the first degree. The defense immediately requested a new trial, but this was denied. Hardin was then ordered to rise by judge counts, to which the judge declared that Hardin was sentenced to death by gallows until dead, and may God have mercy upon his soul. Then Hardin was escorted by Blankenship and Francis back to his cell. Appeals for mercy. Because the sentence of death was now leveled against Hardin, it was felt that the tiny wooden jail in Grundy, Virginia, was not a safe place to keep the prisoner. After all, his family and friends may come to try to free him and hide him away from justice. So the prisoner was moved to the jail in Tazewell, Virginia. The source, Tazewell Republican, dated November 11, 1897, gives us the following report. Quote, on Monday afternoon, Sheriff Charles of Buchanan County brought to this place for lodgment in the county jail a man named John Hardin, who was convicted at the last term of the county court of Buchanan of murder in the first degree. The offense was committed a little over a month ago on Andy's branch of Tug River, and George Mounts was the victim. A suspending order was granted on motion of the council for the purpose of applying to the circuit court for a writ of error. Unquote. After the conviction of John Hardin, for the next 60 days, Attorney F. H. Evans of Buchanan County would plead the case in the appeals process and to Governor O'Farrell. We have the following according to the source, Richmond Dispatch, December 15, 1897 edition. Quote, we'll ask for respite. Mr. F. H. Evans of Buchanan County, counsel for John Hardin, the murderer condemned to be hanged on December 17th, is in the city for the purpose of requesting the governor to grant his client a respite of 60 days. Mr. Evans will urge, as the grounds upon such an action is asked, the fact that George Mounts, the murdered man, had wronged Hardin's wife, and the further fact that the murderer has always been regarded as of weak mind, almost an idiot. Unquote. According to the source, The Times, December 17th, 1897 edition, we have the following. Quote, to pay the penalty. Governor O'Farrell has refused the request for a respite for John Hardin, who has been convicted of murder in Buchanan County and sentenced to be hanged today. The Court of Appeals has also refused to grant a writ of error in the matter, and Hardin will, therefore, suffer the penalty of law today. Unquote. The source, Tazewell Republican, dated December 16, 1897, gives us the following report. Quote, gone to his doom. John Hardin taken to Grundy yesterday. Will be executed tomorrow. He left here in cheerful mood, though he knew the governor had declined to commute his sentence. John Hardin, who was convicted of murder in the first degree at the October term of the County Court of Buchanan County, was taken to jail at this place by Sheriff Charles on Tuesday morning and carried to Grundy, where he will be hung tomorrow. Hardin killed George Mounts early in the fall, was promptly indicted, and was convicted, as we have before stated, of murder in the first degree. He was sentenced to be hung on the 17th of this month. There was an order made suspending the execution to give the convicted man an opportunity to appeal to the circuit court. His counsel applied for the circuit court for a writ of error, but the writ was refused. We understand no effort was made to take the case to the Supreme Court of Appeals. Hardin had been confined in the county jail at this place for 37 days for safekeeping, the authorities of Buchanan County fearing that his friends might make an effort to take him from the jail at Grundy. The doomed man was just 21 years old, uneducated, and, from what we can learn, of rather feeble mind. We are informed that several gentlemen of this place, whose sympathies were aroused by the youthfulness of Hardin, made an effort to get Governor O'Farrell commute the sentence. But on Tuesday afternoon, the governor sent a message that he declined to exercise executive clemency, that the case had been laid fully before him, and the law must be executed. Sheriff Charles brought with him to this place 4 guards to help him guard the prisoner to Doran, where he had 10 additional guards that would go with him to Grundy, where the convicted man is to be executed. This strong guard was occasioned by the report that the friends of the unfortunate man would try to rescue him while en route from Doran to Grundy. We suppose that he will have paid the penalty of his crime before noon tomorrow. Unquote. We have the following according to the source, Richmond Dispatch, December 17th, 1897 edition. Quote, he will hang today. The Court of Appeals yesterday refused to grant the writ of error asked by Attorney F.H. Evans of Buchanan County for his client, John Hardin, condemned to be hanged there today. Governor O'Farrell also refused to grant a respite, so Hardin will die upon the gallows about noon today. Hardin was convicted of the murder of George Mounts, who he claims had seduced his wife. His counsel, as grounds for asking the writ and the respite, urged that Hardin is of weak mind and, furthermore, that his provocation rendered the murder justifiable. Unquote. Preparations for the sentence. According to the source, Mounted People of Southwest Virginia and West Virginia, the story of John Hardin, we have the following account. Quote, before he was hanged, he was asked to be baptized, and Elder Wallace Compton of Regular Baptist Church baptized him. The night before he was hanged, they attempted to feed him his last meal, but he would only take 1/4 of an apple. It was also said that the jailer was fond of John and had taken him out for a walk a few days before he was to die. He informed John that he did not have any weapons on him. John laughed and said to him, neither do I. When they reached a large bottom, the jailer told him that at the bottom was a spring. He was told to proceed by himself to drink, wash his face and hair. The jailer was allowing him to escape, but John did as he was told. Then he came back to the jail on his own. His wife and sister stayed with him the night before he died. His wife also rode with him to the gallows. They say he sang and prayed on his way to the gallows, and that he shook hands with all that was near him. He told everyone to shun liquor and bad women. That was what brought him there that day. Unquote. Sentence carried out. We will deal with what happened to Hardin first. According to the source, the Willing Daily Intelligencer, edition dated December 18th, 1897. Quote, Hardin hanged. Special dispatch to the Intelligencer. Welch, West Virginia, dated December 17th. Murderer John Hardin, who has been confined in Tazewell County, Virginia jail for the past 2 months, was taken to Grundy, the county seat of Buchanan County, and hanged at that place today. The crime for which he paid the penalty with his life was the willful murder of George Mounts on the 15th day of last September. Unquote. There are many cases, such as Mary Queen of Scots and others throughout history, that have had a huge sense of humor when meeting their deaths by execution. It seems that gallows humor is a very real way for people to deal with their upcoming deaths. John Hardin would prove to be such an example of this very thing. According to the source, John Hardin, which was contributed by Michelle Justice, we have the following statement. Quote, standing on a scaffold awaiting the hangman's noose, Hardin told all the men in the audience to, quote, shun liquor and bad women, unquote, as those were the reasons that had brought him to the gallows, unquote. But the most interesting report that we have about Hardin's time before he died came from the source, Crimes, Criminals, and Characters of the Cumberlands and Southwest Virginia. We have the following quote from the book. Quote, asked if he had anything to say, Hardin addressed the crowd. Quote, I am here for killing a man because of my wife. My wife is the cause of it all. I thought I was doing right when I killed Mounts, but now I see I was wrong. The Lord has forgiven me for it, and I'm ready to die. Unquote. He announced that he had composed a hymn and that he would like to sing. It was titled, quote, Let Thy Bosom Be My Pillow, unquote. Taking a sheet of paper from his pocket, he slowly unfolded it. Quote, on this scaffold high for murder, let thy bosom be my pillow, unquote, he sang. The song ended. He bowed his head in prayer. In a few moments he looked up, said quietly, quote, I am prepared to go. I will soon be free from sin, prison, death, and misery, unquote. Sheriff Charles looked at his watch. told Hardin he had but 9 minutes to live. Quote, "That's a short life," unquote, the prisoner quipped with a smile. He took a piece of tobacco from his pocket, and while reaching it, Charles requested him to give it to Mrs. Dennis, who was in the crowd. Quote, "I am ready now," unquote, he said. Quote, "Don't tell me when you're ready to let me drop," unquote. Charles adjusted the rope and prepared to slip a black hood over Hardin's face. The killer of John, George Mounts, saw the sheriff's actions and remembered the cigar he had put in his mouth a moment before, reached it to the man who was to execute him, and said sardonically, quote, "I will this cigar to you," unquote. The sheriff held the cigar in his left hand, raised his right arm to swing down with a hatchet to cut the rope that would send John Hardin to his death, unquote. Thus ended the life of John Hardin. We now have the story of what happened to the body. According to the source, Mounted People of Southwest Virginia and West Virginia, the story of John Hardin, we have the following account. Quote, "After he was hung, his uncle Lewis Hardin put him in a wagon for the trip home to Andy Branch. They stopped at Mary Yates's home on Slate Creek and spent the night there and went on home the next day," unquote. What do you think? Do you think that Lizzie Hardin and George Mounts were carrying on an affair? Or do you think it was all in John Hardin's head? Do you think that the death sentence was fair in this case? Would you have convicted John Hardin in the first place? Let us know in the comment section down below. Thank you. Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our story of Appalachian Outlaw, John Hardin. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification buttons. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.